Midlife Cyclist is a book which changed the lives of many older athletes when it came out in 2021. It's a manual for managing the inevitable changes associated with aging. It was written by Phil Cavell, who started Cycle Fit in London 23 years ago and continues to help riders maximise their performance. And that doesn't just mean going faster. This podcast is a partner to a video in my older athlete series on the YouTube channel, Always Another Adventure. And you can watch this or download the audio version wherever you get your podcasts. I started by asking Phil about his new book due in 2025, The Cycling Addiction.
Essentially, the last one was looking at sort of biology. This one's looking at neurobiology, why we do things. And why we do things when it's going well and why we do things when it's going badly, and the link between the two, and looking at some new concepts and new ways of thinking about people while they're engaging in intense exercise and competition, how they might have more control and make better choices. Because it seems to be that intelligence is actually no insulator from bad decisions. In life, generally speaking, but intelligent people don't necessarily make better decisions, and so intelligence isn't an insulator against making bad training, racing, competition decisions. And then also looking at some famous points in cycling through a neurobiological perspective as well. So this book, really, I've been spending my whole 2 years talking to psychiatrists, neurobiologists, team doctors, athletes, current and past. Some very, very famous, some you've never heard of, some that are dead, so talking to their families. It's not a sensational book, and neither is it an academic book. It's sort of, I suppose it's written in the same tone as this one. This one's, I think, The Midlife Cyclist is a kind book.
Why do you say that? You said that to me before, and I'm curious as to why you think that's a kind book. It's an unusual word to use. I think it is.
Did you think it was a kind book?
I thought it was a very helpful book. I thought it straddled the role between... It was very nicely written. It was written as if a friend was talking to you, so maybe that's the kindness. I also thought it was in part a manual, in that do this, and the thing we were talking about before, the 16 points.
Yeah.
But I also thought it had gone over and beyond the research level. It felt like you'd really studied this. And that's one of the questions I plan to ask you, is the extent to which you spoke to people to get the information that was in there. How did you gather this degree of expertise? Because it sounds like you're doing the same for the next one.
Yeah, the next one, this one is a bigger reach than this one, because obviously here we are in Cycle Fit. I'm immersed in it all day long. I'll spend all day talking with my team, talking with athletes, some very, very good ones, some who are just starting, some having problems, some aren't, some just have plateaued in performance. So all day we're immersed in trying to make athletes perform and function better. That's just, it goes in by osmosis, it's just in the walls. So the Midlife Cyclist was easier in that sense. I didn't have enough specialist knowledge or credibility or credentials to just write it all in one sitting all on my own. So I just reached out to people. And I guess the kindness is that in how I reached out, how they reciprocated, and then how I used them, how they became into the book. Not in a cold way, but they sort of became a cast of characters, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what I mean by kindness, that I wanted to feel that those people who are on my team, who I talk to all the time, I wanted to have them in the book in a way that when you read it, you felt that they were now your team. You could take their advice, and also kindness in the sense that I wanted people to try and take away something which would help them, provoke them to maybe just change something about the way that they are training or racing in a very positive way. Something they found positive that was useful. So in that sense, and these are difficult subjects. This one is the current book is even more difficult. But this is difficult because you're asking people that they love this sport, they love what they're doing, they're getting older, and exercise is a great thing. as you get older, and you're asking people to modify it. So it is a little bit of, you've got to introduce controversial things. So it's how you introduce them. So people don't go, oh, well, I've always done it this way. Yeah, but you haven't always been 56. So. Yeah. In that way, just trying to think about ways where, cause I feel it in myself. I'm no different. It's the way things are introduced and the way things are discussed is really important. And that's what I mean by kind. I want, we want people to improve here.
What I meant by when I said like a friend talking to you is a bit like, I think there's a chapter where you say, and I'm paraphrasing here, let's get the bad news over with first. Right. Your muscles are going to get, are going to reduce in volume. However, and that was the phrase. And I do think this is the first thing that your book was the first thing that started me thinking about this group of people. And I called it the Older Athlete, for me, the Older Athlete series. But we're not, we are only athletes by default because the others have dropped away and have stopped exercising. People who used to play rugby with me when I was at school don't do it anymore. Yeah. And so that's, that could be a good thing if you're in a competition. But it was that whole idea that there is this group of people who want to keep doing fit stuff as they age. And they're the people I think you're speaking to, and we're not meant to. We've never really done this before for fun, maybe when we were subsistence hunters and stuff. Yeah. And that, I think, just shining a light on that and then going on to explain how you can literally cope with it.
Yeah.
That I thought was that was a real good strength of the book. And people like Dr. Peter Attia has gone on and done stuff like that since. But I felt it began with this, really. I don't know which book came first, but I think this is.
Or mine.
Yeah, of course.
I don't know. I mean, I just...
And of course, the Lazarus strategy, Professor Norman Lazarus and what have you, big cyclist.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because this current book I'm writing also starts off the same, not like, it takes the same predicate. What are we trying to do with our mind and body, and what has our mind and body evolved to do? It was a very good way to start the Midlife Cyclist, because it's only controversial. It's like it's not. No one can say, well, that's not right. Well, no, it is right. It's like if you think about what our evolved function, we're in the ancestral environment. It was all done by 30, 31. So, not saying you can't exercise at 60, 70, 80, 90, but it just hasn't been tried before. And in the numbers, the sufficient numbers that we've got now to give us enough for a longitudinal study. So, that's incontrovertible. You can't. That's just true. It's only been a couple of centuries until we crept out of the average age of life expectancy in the modern world of being 50, 60.
So is the new book aimed more at cyclists across the whole age group?
Yeah, it does. It
sounds like it is.
Yeah, so it's called the cycling addiction. So it's not age specific. It's just looking at the neurobiology of performance it is aimed at everybody. Well, obviously this one was aimed very much at the kind of 40, 50, 60, 70 and above. But it starts in the same place. Let's get it straight in our minds. The premise here is what did you evolve to do, and what are you trying to do? And if there's a dissonance there, then let's understand it and see if we can kind of it somehow improves the situation, rather than like, well, there's nothing you can do, it's all going to be a disaster. Well, that's clearly not true, but at least point out where the challenges are. And they're not all known, Simon, by the way. They're not all known.
Cycle Fit, this place, when you said it came from your own injuries?
Yeah, so my co-director Julian, both of us raced. We raced. We weren't, we were club racers really, but like a lot of club racers, we just always got hurt and injured, and so you went to a physio, you went to a doctor or a surgeon, and they'd sort of patch you up and stitch you up, and you get back on the bike. But if it was a chronic injury, like your knee injury, you need to know what the antecedent is, and with cycling, it was so steeped in tradition that no one was really interested in what the antecedent was. You just asked the oldest person on the club ride and they would tell you what you needed to do. Rub your knee with lemon juice, or strap it in a J-cloth, or whatever nonsense they came up with. And everyone meant very well, but it was so steeped in tradition and heritage that the blinding light of science wasn't really peeking through. So what we were finding is our club mates and teammates, they would just get the same injury over and over and over again. So that, if they had a propensity to get a knee injury on one side, guess what? It would just keep returning. So they weren't dealing with the underlying cause. And of course, the underlying cause was the relationship with the bike. So we decided late 90s that there needed to be a process to evaluate the relationship between the body and the bike. And it had to be dynamic. You couldn't just take someone's measurements and say, okay, well, your inside leg's this, your shoulder's this, your arm's this is the bike you should ride and the position you should ride, because it didn't tell you anything about how the body moved in space dynamically. And it's the dynamic bit that causes the injuries. Static bodies don't get injured. Moving bodies get injured. So it had to be dynamic. And that was the epiphany, which is, okay, so we need to understand how the body moves, its ranges of movement, and then we need to evaluate the dynamic body on the bicycle, and then we need to think about what changes are going to improve that person. Which sounds simple, but it took time, and Ben Sirotto was already doing some work in the field, so we went and worked with Ben for a long time, which is brilliant. And then we continued it. We added to it and moved it along. And the big thing we were interested in, fascinated with, was the foot, because we understood that the foot functions differently in cycling than any other environment other than possibly skiing. So it was the foot that we needed to understand, because if you didn't get the foot right, then there's a very good chance that nothing is going to be right. So it's taken us. We're still learning and we're still changing and adapting all the time. But that was the epiphany: static bodies, dynamic bodies, and then the role of the foot. But evaluating someone's function and ranges of motion is massively important. So you get to the point where you kind of know what you're going to see. Once you've gone through a full evaluation, ranges of motion, someone's told you about all their injuries and their legacy of athletic injuries and problems, and you've done a full functional movement screen, you kind of know what you're going to see. Sometimes you're surprised, but you sort of know what you're going to see. So you're already thinking down the track about the changes you're going to make and recommend to make that person function better.
Was there a moment in your life, or in cycling life, that you thought, I need to do things differently? And did that lead to the Midlife Cyclist?
Yeah, the answer is all the time. And so I've had quite a lot of injuries. My best discipline racing was criterium racing, and which is obviously it's got inherent risks. You fall off a lot, and there's quite a lot of loading criterium, because it's quite.
Just explain criterium, just for people who don't necessarily know that sort of racing.
So criterium racing is quite short, so it's an hour and a half. Sometimes around city centres, sometimes around short circuits. So
lots of turns and bends.
Yeah. So it's a mile or a mile and a half or a kilometre circuit.
Yeah.
Lots of twists and turns, little hills.
Wet roads.
Wet roads, very punchy. So it suits a particular kind of rider. But obviously there's risks attached to it. So it's you fall off, and the loading, exploding in and out the saddle all the time, produces particular loading. So I got injured a lot, I got hurt a lot, and I had to then start adjusting my position on the bike to reflect that, and still do.
I was meaning more your lifestyle with age, as you kind of thought, I need to not keep hitting at those peak heart rates quite so often.
Oh, you mean, and from a physiological perspective rather than a...
Yeah, rather than the bike fit it's like you were becoming a midlife cyclist.
Yeah, and so in the same way that as you get older, you and I were talking about spectacles earlier, in the same way that it's just very common, de rigueur, for older people to start to wear reading glasses. The same things are happening everywhere in our body, it's just they're not all quite so visible. So everything is just changing and adjusting as you get older. And you either deny it and just move it and stick it in a box under your bed and forget about it, or you try and flag it up and attenuate to those changes and make rational calibrations to your bike and to your lifestyle to make you perform better longer. And it wasn't always my natural inclination to do the latter, but there's a certain point where the evidence is overwhelming. And so, yeah, absolutely. And with training, it's like, it is very possible for people 50, 60, 70 to perform a really high level. But unlike young people, it always has to be thought about. You don't get the 70-year-old who just jumps on a bike right now and again and wins a race. That ain't going to happen. If you want to perform really well at 60 or 70 or even mid-50s, there's a lot of work that has to go on. A lot of dominoes have to fall absolutely in line.
Did you start incorporating more strength training to what you were doing?
I did. I cycled less, so
right.
So it's one of the contradictions in the book. One of the ironies in the book is if you want to perform at a higher level cycling as you get older, you actually need to do less cycling.
Yeah.
Because it won't do anything for sarcopenia, muscle loss, fibre loss. It won't do anything, for bone density. So you actually have to kind of modify if you want to go faster, you actually have to sort of go a bit slower for a while.
Yeah, you actually say give up a cycling, give up a session and do some weights instead, or do some strength instead.
Or do something different. So cycling,
mix it up.
So, going back to the whole thing about cycling not being a natural thing for the human body to do, your hips inflection, your spine's inflection. There's not many, in the ancestral environment, you didn't really have your spine inflection, your hip inflection. It never happened. It might be you're kneeling around the campfire at the end of the day, but not actively. So the cycling position is not that natural to produce huge amounts of power with a flexed spine and flexed hip. So on the other days you're not cycling, do something completely different. So so have spinal extension and hip. So think about the opposites, because cycling is not natural. So do things that stress the body in a completely opposite way, which is completely counter to what we were all taught when we were in our 20s and 30s. No, if you want to be a cyclist, you need to kind of calcify your body into this kind of, this kind of like...
Ride a bike, ride a bike, ride a bike.
Exactly. It's like, well, actually, that's not always true. It's certainly not true for people as they get older. They need to do They need to do different things.
I mean, do you go to the gym? Do you have stuff at home? Do you do weights? What do you do for your strength training?
Yeah, so do as I say, not as I do. I'm an outdoor person. I like to do outdoory things. So the things that I will do lots of paddleboarding.
Lots of
paddleboarding.
Okay, right.
Because you're standing up.
Right.
And it's very good for your core.
Yeah.
And it's the same for me. It's the same as cycling. I'm getting the same.
It's a good workout for your upper body as well.
Yeah, it's just good for everything, and it's the complete antidote to cycling. My daughter likes to go to the climbing wall, so the climbing wall is really good for middle-aged athletes.
It's fantastic, as long as you don't get obsessed. Crikey, I've got friends who...
Oh, really?
I've got friends who are mad on the climbing,
they
always have been.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, they're skinny, but their knuckles and their hands are... Oh.
Yeah, I get it. But I'm past. Obviously, I'm not. Yeah, but I do think it's really good for middle-aged athletes, cyclists, to do the climbing wall. Again, your extension, you're stressing your body in a different way. It's you're working asymmetrically. Whereas cycling is all linear and controlled, and these repeated loads on the body. Whereas climbing is you're extending these ranges. It's by nature inherently you're moving in a different way. These are the kinds of yes, I'll do a little bit of gym work, but more I will try and find activities that produce the same results: climbing wall, paddleboarding, that kind of thing. That's anything that I can do that is sort of real.
When we were talking earlier, you were talking about the contributions to the other book. Let's just talk about the contributions to this book. You said you took a tribal approach to it in an email that we had discussion. I'm intrigued by the idea of a tribe.
Yeah, okay, so the readership is a tribe, of which I'm a member, so that, the Midlife Cyclist. And then, obviously we're a tribe here, we work together all day long. So my first instinct is always to reach out to the people that I work with every day, I see every day. So not knowing that they won't have the answer, but my first instinct always is to go and see Nicola next door, or Mick, the podiatrist, or or Dr. John Baker, the physiologist.
Is that to run the question, to firm up what question you're asking?
Yeah, just to talk about the subject. So Dr. David Holse is in the book a lot. He doesn't have a clinic here anymore, but we see him all the time when he's in London. He passes through, he hangs out. We bring him into sessions if we need him. So run it round them first. and then Dave will say, "Oh, yeah, this is a question for so and so," and then then I'll contact so and so, and then we'll extend the conversation. So, and then also Nigel Stevens was already part of the extended family.
Nigel Stevens?
He's the cardiologist, one of the cardiologists I refer to. And Nigel had been giving, we operate these winter lecture series nearly every year, not every year, but we're doing one in 2025, but we just done one in 24. So we have like a winter lecture series where a visiting speaker comes along, and they're normally quite high level. And Nigel's been doing it for years for us, over 10 years. And he's a client of mine, and I'm a client of his. So Nigel was like, it was, it was very simple to reach out to Nigel, say, Nigel, I want to talk to you. And then we spoke many, many times. So that's what I mean by family. And then if I,
Tribe.
Tribe. So then he picks up a piece of research. And I'm like, well, okay, I need to chase that down. So I contact the people who did the research. But at least that's a good way for me to ripple out, rather than just sort of sit in a bunker and think, it's like talking about it with the people I work with here.
Are you aware of how the Midlife Cyclist has filtered through that bigger tribe and made some changes? I'm just wondering, because I know you've done podcasts, you've spoken to the likes of me, and we're on a bit from that now. So you've got time to see the ripples coming back at you. I'm just wondering if you're aware of the extent to which your reach has gone.
It's yes. And
you're pleased with the book, in other words?
I am pleased with it now. I wasn't when it was released, but that's common, I think. When you finish a book, you kind of, you're the worst person to objectively review it, aren't you? So the books have a much longer life than I think was expected by myself or by the publisher. It sort of keeps bubbling up, and then it goes quiet again, and it bubbles up again, which is good. Obviously I hear back from a lot of people come in and talk about it, or they've read it and want to talk about a particular topic in it, which is good. It's always good, actually. Some of the feedback wasn't. Some people didn't like the book, and that's completely fine. I don't look at the reviews. I've never read any of the reviews. My wife does, but I don't. It's like dropping a child off at school, isn't it? Writing a book. It's like it's got to kind of make its own way.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like it's got its own life, really.
That's good. Changing the subject a little bit, tell me a little bit about what happens in this place, in the old fire station. Let's talk about the business of Cycle Fit now. Because I was wondering, it's interesting because the phrase cycle fit could mean different things, can't it? Although it's all about the same point. It's making you ride your bike in a more sustainable, healthy, ideally fast, better performing way. But it's more than just putting you in the right position on your bike. There's this physios, just this whole thing of, I suppose that's your local tribe. How does that all work together? How does that all fit together?
We've been working with the same people on and off for many years, and then new people join and train with us and then drift off and come back. We've got quite an illustrious alumni here of people who've worked with us and for us, bike fitters, physios, go off and go and work for Sky or Ineos, or we've got quite which is good, because then they come back and then they've learned something and bring it in, and so it's quite a big extended family, Cycle Fit. It's been going for a long time, 23 years or something. So there's a lot of people have passed through these doors, trained to do one thing or another, or they've and so we've got a very big extended family. And then they come back sometimes. I'm working again with a guy at the moment called Dr. Mark Kirkman. Dr. Mark Kirkman was a bike fitter here in the 2000s, went back to South Africa, and he's a physiologist. So he's now back locally, and he's now coaching some of my clients, and he might do a bit of bike fitting. So he's part of the old Cycle Fit alumni that has who's come back. He's come back with new skills and new experiences. It's
difficult, actually, when you're looking at your website. It's difficult to get a handle on all the things you do, actually, because do I need a physio? Do I need a bike fit? Do I need a doctor? What do I need? But it's probably a bit of all.
All or none of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And how do you advise people that? Do you do an assessment on them first of all? You bring your bike in, we'll tell you what bit you need.
So it might be that someone comes in to see Nicola because they've got back pain, and Nicola is a really good bike fitter herself, really good. So Nicola will, they've come in for back pain, and she asks them lots of questions, similar to how we would ask people lots of questions. She'll do some tests, and she'll say, look, the way you've explained this, the back pain keeps happening after you ride your bike. So, I can definitely make the back feel better, but we also need to look at the bike. So then Nicola will then refer the person into us, and then we will look at the person, and almost certainly Nicola, because she's really diligent and caring, she'll come in and say, okay, let me see what I can see that might be causing that asymmetrical right-sided lower back pain. Not on the left, it's on the right. So something's happening on the right of the body that isn't happening on the left of the body. And then we look at it and say, okay, there are some changes we can make here, but probably an orthotic would really, really help. So then they've gone through Nicola, they've now come through me, and they're now seeing Mick for an orthotic. And then at the end of it, that isn't always how it happens, but that's how it could happen. And then now we've got a whole sort of chronological journey with them. So if they then, in 2 years' time, flag up and say, oh, that back pain's back again, we can go back through our notes, go into their file and say, okay, we did this, 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 and this. The next steps would seem to be this. And that's how we work all the time. So it doesn't all come through the bike fitters. It doesn't all come through Nicola or Mick or John Baker. But, we have to be alive to the fact that at some point, I can't complete the picture here. I can do a bit of it, but there's a bit of it which is somebody's way better skilled than I am.
You're working with Team EF at the moment. And,
yeah.
How different are the demands that the pros bring to you than me, for example?
Well, the principles are the same. They're made of biology like we are, like you are. It's a different process. You're tending to make much smaller changes with them, partly because they've got, their body is their career, so they're innately very resistant sometimes to change.
Because they've been doing it one way for so long.
Sure, and their whole worth is, wrapped up in being functional, and then functional leading to success, and then success leading to, a better career. So, they're absolutely right. So it's about establishing trust, and then having a long relationship with them, and also getting them the best. If you're not the right person, making sure that you get them the right person. That you're not trying to kind of like, I need to control all of this. All the pressure's on me. It's not. There's something you don't know. Then you bring in somebody that does. And the younger ones, the younger professionals, tend to have a slightly different mindset. They tend to know more about their own body, and they tend to be much more open-minded about things like orthotics and I think that's the team also. They're coming into the team younger now, and the team itself is absolutely up to date with nutrition and strength and conditioning and physiotherapy. They're brilliant at it. So the younger athletes now come in, they've probably already been exposed to all of it anyway, and then they're in this fantastic environment. They feel absolutely looked after. And we're just a very small piece of that puzzle. Very, very small, really. It ramps up in importance when you've got a really important rider who's getting injured before a big event. And then all of a sudden the bells start ringing, lights are on the dashboard, and then we'll get a call, and then they're flown over here quickly. So they're over here and come and spend a day or a weekend or a couple of days here. And that's when it gets a bit more kind of. Otherwise, we're generally at team camp. Julian, my co-director, is at Girona at the moment. So in it's kind
of. You fit them at the camp.
Yeah, so he's taken a jig to the camp. He's got saddle pressure mapping. He's got all the data and all the technology we have here. He's taken with him, which is why this room is stripped. So he's out there, and then he's got a massive, great big database of all the riders that he's seen, all the new riders, and he's just building up a picture of them all. The men and women riders, and then trying to also predict how that. Part of this is predictive. Trying to predict where a rider might run into problems in the future and how you can head them off a different way. You know, if they've had a history of a particular issue, so well, we don't want that to reoccur. So that's a discussion with one of the team doctors, one of the physios, one of the medical staff, and then Julian might say, well, you know, we've got a history of this type of thing. Why don't we try, you know, a short crank? They've never tried a 165 crank. You know, it's the right time to try it now, going into the winter season. Why don't we try that? And then you try it, and then you get the feedback from the athlete. And so these are the kinds of things that you're trying to head off there. You know, they had a history of hip pain. So, well, we might be able to work with that. You know, that's his job in that moment, to try and think about whether the problems might be down the track and head them off.
You've spoken there in a way about how cycling has changed, that approach of the riders. How has bike fitting changed in the 23 years you've been doing this? And what do you think about those changes? Loads of people go for bike fits now.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of computerization of it. It's pretty easy to go in somewhere and then you get this stick man on the screen with the dots all over you. And I just wonder what you think about that approach to doing it. It seems like almost anyone could do it.
I think technology allows, yes. I don't have a particular resistance to any of the technology or any of the systems. And we know the people that invented Retool, friends of ours from America, very good guys. One of the guys that was behind that was an extremely talented bike fitter in Colorado. So it's a question of what works for the person. You know, you, the recipient of the service, have to judge whether this is working for you or not. And a lot of that will be down to the person you're dealing with, because we're social creatures, aren't we? So I might be getting the best advice in the world, but it needs to be delivered to me in a way that I can interrogate and understand. And so I don't have I guess we're generally a lot of time the bike fitters of last resort here, just by nature. So there are people who've often been around the houses a few times.
Interesting.
And someone said, look, go and see these guys, and they come in and they're a bit cynical and weary. Chronic injury is very debilitating mentally, for any athlete, but especially a professional athlete. So, and they're at a low ebb. So that, what we shouldn't be doing at that point is pretending we're magicians and wowing them with our technology. At that point, it really is just listening to what's gone before, making really detailed notes about everything they've been through and what they want, what they want to change, and then bring them into the process of change. And that's a very human process, isn't it? What you can't do. I was working with an athlete just before the Olympics, but it was touch and go whether they were going to go to the Olympics. So they've got a big team around them, and so that really is sitting down and listening to them, listening to what they think and where they think their challenges are and what they want to do, and then you can give your ideas about, well, okay, if you're experiencing this, you want to get to here, this is the time frame we've got. I'm going to suggest that we sort of think maybe going down this road. And rather than be dogmatic about it, or here's my WASI technology. My WASI technology is telling me you need to do this. That would never work for me. What would work for me is a human being saying, hey, I'm fallible, you're fallible, technology's fallible, but let's make the best judgments we all can together to try and get you where you need to be. So I do like technology. I love technology. And I do think sometimes some people only need a little bit of technology to get where they need to be. And some people need an awful lot more, and it's down to their physiology. So for some people, a bike fit can be half an hour long and doesn't need to be that detailed. They haven't had any problems, and they've got the ability within their physiology to kind of soak up a little bit of malalignment, discrepancy. I think in the book they're called
micro adjusters and macro absorbers.
And that was a phrase that my colleague Phil Burke came up with. Phil's a really good friend and a really good bike fitter. So Phil came up with that. We used to run a science symposium And
He put me on 165 cranks.
Did he? Feels great. Good man. So Phil used to be the Sky bike fitter. Phil and I talk quite a lot still. And years ago, I asked Phil to do a lecture for us at our science symposium, and I gave him the title. I think I gave him the title, and he came up with that at the lecture. And I just thought it was his whole lecture was brilliant, but it was also a really lovely way. You know, he introduced that to the symposium, and it was great because it could set people thinking. You know, it doesn't need to be technology that changes things. It can be ideas that change things. A way of contextualizing things can. And what Phil introduced at that symposium many years ago was a new idea. I see. So some people are. I see. So having that in your mind as a bike fitter is great. It's like you can't treat everybody the same. Mm-hmm. Some people deal very well with minor discrepancies and disparities in setup, and some people, they're a princess in the pea. You know, one thing slides and the wheels fall off.
I think that's what you did in the book, though. You know, you introduced an idea of this aging cohort that wants to stay doing the same, and then everything follows from that. That's what I think you did in that book, and I don't think, well, for me at least, it had not been identified in that way.
Yeah.
Let me just finish off by asking you this: do you still enjoy your cycling?
I love it. Absolutely.
Even being surrounded by bikes and saddles and all this tackle all day?
Why would I not enjoy it?
Well, some people who make their hobby their business kind of get a bit jaded because they are doing it every day.
No, it's still my, you know, I mean, I get frustrated that I can't, when you were talking about you cycling where you live in the Highlands and the fact you do mostly gravel riding, you know, I'm like, oh my God, that's just, you know, I want to do that. I want to do more of that. But it's not how my life's set up. So this morning I was out, before you and I met, I was out early in the park, in Richmond Park, just doing a few gentle laps in the drizzle. And that's all I could do today.
Mate, I'm staying in Richmond next to the park. We should have gone for a ride.
Did I say Richmond? I meant Regents. No, I used to ride in Richmond. Yeah, Richmond Park's great. Richmond Park is a couple of steps up from Regents Park.
Right.
But, you know, so in the park this morning, there must have been a couple of hundred riders riding round. I went the other way round. That's all I could do. But it was lovely. It's really lovely. So I absolutely love it. But I can't do what I want to do, and I can't do what I used to do. I've got constraints. Some of them physical, and some of them
life.
You know, yeah, just logistical. But when listening to you about the gravel rides, oh my God, that just sounds phenomenal. You know, I want to do that.
Standing invitation.
I know, thank you. That's so kind. But what it makes me think is like, okay, I just need to, you know, when you said that, the change in me is, I need to make sure that I partition some time and go and do that, because it's important for me to do that. And I don't do enough of it. So it was the fact that you said it has registered. I want to go. Do you know what I mean? So yes, the long answer to a very short question: yes.
See you in the Highlands.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I wonder if I'll see him on the new West Coast cycle trail I'm developing for 2025. My huge thanks to Phil Cavell and his team at CycleFit. You might have heard them working quietly in the background. A reminder, you can see a condensed version of this interview, but with more pictures and sequences as part of the Older Athletes series on Always Another Adventure. If you've enjoyed this, you might consider buying me a coffee. The price of a cortado helps keep the show on the road. Links are in the show notes, in the video description, and at alwaysanotheradventure.com. I'm Simon Willis. Thank you for listening and watching. Goodbye.